Every time we have a major update in Dead by Daylight, a lot of people come to my stream and ask me what I think about this or that change. So a long time ago, a few years ago, in fact, I started doing this thing where I write up my opinion about every major change that comes to the game. And you can find this on my website or on my Discord. But with the latest update, we have a bit of an issue. As you can see, there's just so much to discuss. Even a basic summary didn't really fit into a single Discord message. I hit the character limit really quickly. So I decided, why don't we make a video and go into each change of the upcoming 920 PTB into more detail. Let's start with the quick ones, shall we? The first thing that we're seeing is Ghoul is getting a change that will not let him kidnap survivors anymore. Basically, when the Ghoul hooks onto you with his power over a pallet, your character just stands still and he gives him free hits, which is something that a killer this powerful doesn't really need. So they're taking that away. Good thing, don't see a problem with it at all. Another change that's very minor but probably pretty helpful is the Oni now getting more blood orbs when he hooks a survivor. Currently, if you hook a survivor, you get 2 blood orbs, 2 tiny little blood orbs, which don't really amount to much. Keep in mind that hitting a healthy survivor with a basic attack only gives you about 40% of your power. So right now, hooking a survivor really quickly after a hit is actually kind of a bad thing. You might as well just chase him for longer. This might change that, and is overall a great change, especially considering what we're going to see later. Another one that seems very small, but I think is really good, is the clown readjustment. They're going to make his yellow bottles activate a little bit later, making you have to think about where you throw them a bit more than before. I've always believed this is a good thing about the yellow bottles. Absolutely no problem with that. And they're making the purple or pink slowdown bottles linger just a little bit more. We don't see the numbers, but at least this seems like a good thing. Even half a second on both of these changes would make the clown feel a lot better to play as and play against, in my opinion. We then have an unknown change, which is very small. They're changing the angle at which he can shoot, allowing you to go for shots that are maybe not possible right now. That's great. They're also making one of his add-ons that is very popular a little bit more basic, so that when he teleports, he gains movement a little bit sooner. Maybe other changes as well. This seems good. No one's complaining about this. The most important change is that his weaken will take longer to remove. It shouldn't feel too bad as a survivor, but it definitely will feel better as a killer. So far, good stuff. We then go into a very major change, the Myers rework. We no longer have a killer that goes from tier 1 to tier 2 into then tier 3. Now he basically has 2 modes that he can switch on at any time. The stalking mode, where he is kind of like before, slower, no terror radius, he can stalk, and the normal mode where he's basically a tier 2. He has some enhanced abilities, but he's a basic killer overall. If you stalk survivors enough, however, you go into the old tier 3, the evil within mode. It's now called evil incarnate mode. Basically, this makes him a dash killer. People are making fun on Twitter about this, but yeah, there's a little GIF that they attach. As you can see, he basically gets like a charge coup de grace, like a big charge attack. It's kind of like a Bubba or a Billy insta-down. This will count as a special attack, which means that, for example, Surge will not be usable. And the most important thing of it all, obviously, is the fact that they're reworking his add-ons and everything in his power to account for the other changes, which means no longer insta-Mori at 5 gens with a Tombstone. He will be able to Mori you when you're already dead on hook, but the whole Tombstone thing is a thing of the past, which I think is really good. I think this also means that his really annoying evil incarnate achievement will now be very easy to do, which is a major blessing for newer players that don't have it yet. If you don't know how stupid that achievement is, I have some video over here explaining it. But yeah, if you know, you know. Moving on, now all of the stealth perks that make survivors stealthy will be under a single umbrella. Now survivors have their own version of undetectable, which killers have had for a long time. This is amazing. I don't know if you remember, but a long time ago, killers didn't have undetectable. They simply had a lot of different effects that all did the same thing kind of differently. So when the undetectable status effect was brought into the game, a lot of killers now were a lot simpler, and it's much easier for survivors and for killers to understand what's going on. We are going to have the same thing happen for survivor now. Whenever you have a perk like Dance With Me, or maybe Off the Record, or maybe Lucky Break, any of these perks that normally hide your presence, now they're just going to be doing the same status effect under different triggering conditions. And I think for the sake of new players, simplifying this is great. It's really good. I have no complaints about this. The only thing that does concern me a little bit is that there are some perks that give a very long lasting effect, such as Off the Record, currently being 80 seconds. So I mean, if off the record gives you 80 seconds of no pools of blood, no aura, and no scratch marks, that's even stronger than it is now. So I wonder how these perks are gonna be adapted. I am a little bit curious, but I mean, I'm sure they'll adjust them up or down as necessary. I think this is overall a really good change that everyone should celebrate, especially if you care about new players. But now we get into the meaty, the need and greed of this update, okay? The things that really are changing the gameplay loop of DBD and the reason why I'm making this video. In this next update, we're gonna be testing the slugging and tunneling reduction changes. Let's begin with the slugging one, which I think is the less important of the two, if you can believe it. Basically, anytime a survivor is slugged now, you have a timer. Very similar to the anti-camp. You have the normal recovery, which now happens automatically. Notice that the Dwight is moving, right? And he doesn't need to stand still to recover. Basically, survivors have basic tenacity, the perk from David Tap. And also, over time, the longer you've been on the ground, you crawl faster so that you have a bit more agency. Not a huge deal. But the thing is, that second bar, when it fills up fully to 99 and then 100%, now the survivor basically has unbreakable. They can pick themselves up by themselves with no help for the rest of the trial. We actually had to confirm this, but one of the developers in the forums has been very kind to confirm it. Basically, anytime that you fill up that 90-second timer, you now can pick yourself up under any circumstance. Now, the first time you would need 90 seconds, obviously, to fill it up. But the second time you only need to recover normally, which takes about 32 seconds. So I've done some basic math. And if I'm not mistaken, you can pick yourself up to 5 times. Up to 5 times. That is pretty significant. Obviously, factoring unbreakable, exponential, and that number can move up and down a lot. What this really, really means is that killers that relied on slugging a lot are gonna have a harder time. And any killer that relied on slugging as their main strategy is going to be hit by this very, very severely. Slugging, I want to say, is not dead when you do it a little bit, but slugging in general as a main strategy is completely gone after this update. And I'm really not exaggerating. Once a survivor has been on the ground for 90 seconds, you just cannot slug them. You have to pick them up. And some perks are going to be adjusted to account for this. We don't know what that is like just yet. But just keep in mind, you no longer have the question of like, oh, if I try to slug all the survivors, will they have 1 or 2 unbreakables? Now everyone has unbreakable. Keep in mind that survivors on the hook can be there for a very, very long time. So if a survivor goes for another survivor and you down them and you leave them on the ground, yeah, that other survivor would hit stage 2, but they would eventually be able to pick themselves up and then unhook. So you really cannot do any kind of long-term slugging anymore. That strategy should be very, very, very well dead and buried. I feel okay about this change. I think this change on its own would be all right. Then we can nerf and buff and change all the other elements of the game to make slugging less of a strategy. And I don't think that would be a problem. But as you will see, the other changes are also quite survivor favored. So I don't know how to feel about this. Let's move on. The most important change that's happening this update is the tunneling reduction update. Now, I made a video some time ago explaining why tunneling was an issue and how I would have solved it. This is just goes much, much further and is way, way more complex than anything I envisioned. First things first, survivors now have some small, not super, 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 super big, but some small help, which I've highlighted here, to basically make them easier to slip away and make them harder to tunnel for the killer. First of all, you no longer see in real time when a survivor is hooked. You do see which survivor was hooked last to help you not hook the same person. We'll see why that's important later. And on top of the current help the survivors get when unhooked, they also have extra help. They gain haste, they gain endurance, and they gain elusive, aka they're gonna be harder to find. They also lose collision. This is a good thing. I think collision would allow survivors to basically bully the killer and just get in your face, and a survivor that you don't want to tunnel now comes and takes a hit. So losing collision is great, but it doesn't solve everything. But either way, they're also immune to killer instinct, which has never, never, ever, ever happened before. There's been nothing in the game up until this point that made you immune to any killer instinct. But for example, if you're playing Legion, you will not know if a survivor is nearby because they will be immune. On top of that, they get some very, 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 very strong effects if they are dying too quick. There's 2 of them. If a survivor dies before 6 hook stages total have been reached, the other survivors all get a boost to their repair speed. Now, here we don't have the numbers. This boost could just be 5%. And then it wouldn't be that big of a deal. It could be 10%, and that would be pretty good, but it wouldn't be game-changing. But if it's something like 20 or 25%, if it's a really big number, this is incredibly, incredibly tough. I think it's very, very difficult to play an average killer and get a kill by the time you have 6 or 7 hook stages and not already be in a very, very, very tight endgame already. Keep in mind that 6 hook stages means that you've killed 1 survivor, that's 3, and then you've hooked every other survivor 1 time, at least. That's hard. That's really, really hard. I don't think it's very controversial. I know I play a bit more killer than survivor, but I don't think it's very killer-sided of me or killer-biased of me to say that killing 1 survivor with 6 or 7 hook stages is something that is super achievable against good survivors. Against good survivors, they are going to be so efficient on gens that they will typically force you to take some shortcut. And this is a little scary, but the really, really strong one, the really, really powerful one is the next one, all right? The next one is the really, really big change. If you sacrifice or mori or kill in any way a survivor that was the last one to be unhooked, you get hit by a massive change that makes all gens for the rest of the trial, presumably, no longer be able to get kick, damage, or even blocked by perks like Deadman Switch. This is huge. This is absolutely huge. This does mean that as a general rule, if you're gonna kill Survivor A, you need to hook Survivor B first. So you could tunnel Survivor A, and then tunnel Survivor A again, 2 hooks, then hook Survivor B, then hook Survivor A again, and now they would be dead, and you would bypass that debuff to all gens being basically undamageable, but you would eat the first one. Now the other 3 survivors would do gens faster, obviously. So yeah, you really as a killer will really be looking to hook in multiple survivors and basically keeping them busy, keeping them on the ropes for a little bit until you have 6 hook stages and someone dies. We will see what the implications are of that later. But killer doesn't just get a debuff, they do get some good things. Let's talk about them. So anytime you hook a survivor that is not being immediately hooked before, aka anytime you're not actively tunneling, right? You get 3 things. You get a temporary haste, which is kind of like furtive chase or devour hope. You get a slight haste to get to the next gen or get to the next change a little bit quicker. That's nice. We don't know what this haste is like. If I had to guess, it's going to be like 5% for 10 seconds or 5% for 20 seconds. I don't think it's going to be super major. You also get a base kit barbecue and chili-like effect. I imagine that perks like barbecue and chili will be adjusted for this. So basically all killers get barbecue and chili effect. And also you get a base kit mini or baseline pop goes the weasel, which means that the next time you kick a generator, maybe you'll do 10% damage, maybe you'll do 25% damage, maybe you'll do 40% damage, but I'm sure it's not going to be that big. So you get mini pop, you get mini barbecue, you get mini play with your food or whatever other haste perk. And for some reason, which is really funny, Blight, Nurse, Ghoul, Billy, Dracula, and I thought Singularity. No, Singularity's not in this list. These killers do not get this effect. I don't know if he was edited out or if I'm just misremembering. Yeah, but these killers have a lesser effect of this. So all of these things that I just mentioned, they'll be weaker for these killers. The obvious reason why is because these killers are either S tier or close to S tier. But it's just a little fun to see the developers acknowledge this. They don't really seem to acknowledge this in any other thing, right? So what does this mean? All right, let's go by the effects, okay, one by one. First of all, a small haste effect to most killers is absolutely worthless. If I am playing in an average map, which average size, and I'm playing Trapper, and I move 5% faster for 10 seconds, so what? So what? Now, if you give that to a Blight or a Billy or a killer that can teleport like Unknown or a killer that's really fast like Wraith, I think those killers can use it okay because they move so quick or they teleport so quick that they will get to use most of the of the movement speed during the start of the next chase. For example, I think this could be really, really good for Dredge. Dredge hooks, he sees barbecue and chili effect, which by the way, he's really good on Dredge. Then he teleports to the most juicy survivor, the one that's most vulnerable. And then maybe he has 5 or 6 or 10 seconds left of a little bit of extra speed boost, which on Dredge is really, really powerful, right? So for some killers, this seems really, really good. For others, especially the ones that are already on the weak side, I think this haste will do absolutely nothing. It is nice that they are thinking of lessening it for the stronger killers, but we'll see what that's like. Let's then go to the new base kit, barbecue and chili. I'm going to be completely honest, I don't think this is a massive, massive, massive buff to killer. Most of the times, survivors already assume that you have barbecue and chili, so they already play around it a little bit. Now they won't assume. Now they will know. They will know. The nicest thing about barbecue and chili is the odd situation here and there where survivors don't expect it. So they are healing in a open area, or they're going into basement to try to heal there, or maybe they're doing a gen in a really, really weak area and they don't expect you to show up, maybe, right? Or maybe you're playing a stealth killer and they really don't know that you're creeping them up from a different angle, right? So these unexpected situations is what makes barbecue and chili good. Now that every killer is going to have barbecue and chili, 2 things are going to happen. If you're close, you stay close a little bit and you avoid the effect. And if you're far, you look to outplay it. You get behind a gen, making it harder for the killer to see you. You get inside a locker for 4 seconds, big deal, or whatever many seconds you need to. Or if you have a perk that conceals you, you know you're perfectly safe. Also, if you know that you're in the open, you're not going to be caught off guard because you know the killer has it 100%. So you're just going to reposition or at least look out. So this barbecue effect on a lot of killers, again, especially the weaker, slower ones, it's not going to be that big of a deal. Funnily enough, it might be a pretty decent buff to strong killers already. Like, having barbecue and chili base kit means that Nurse now doesn't need info perks too much. She can really just run anti-healing, anti-gem progression, this and that. So some of the stronger killers in the game now just get a nice little boost of information, you know, just like that. Even if it's slightly lessened, I still think that's the bit of an unnecessary buff to these killers, which otherwise would be wasting 1 perk slot on barbecue, right? So that's really not that strong. Now, we get to possibly the strongest and most meaningful buff that the killers are getting here, the mini pop goes the weasel, the bonus damage for the next generator kick. If you don't know, anytime a generator is kicked by the killer, without any other perks or modifiers, this generator does 5% damage reduction. It takes 5% damage and then it starts bleeding progress after that. So if a generator is, I don't know, at 50% and you kick it, now it's at 45 and then slowly at 44 and then slowly at 43, 42, you get it. Bonus damage means that maybe instead of 5, we'll do 15 or 20%, which is great. It's awesome. This is amazing. Having a reason to hook a survivor is something that we have been begging, and I have been begging behavior to introduce into the game desperately. The developers really needed to reward killer for hooking people outside of perks. So I think this is awesome. But it's not automatic. You have to go and kick the gen. This introduces or aggravates some existing problems. Number 1, big maps where gens are really spread out, well, you're not going to get there in time. Slower killers, which are typically the weakest ones, they are the least able to go around the map kicking things. As a trapper, you are never going to go and kick gens across the map. It's really not going to happen. You have to play a bit more territorial. So there might be situations where you don't get to use this effect. It also really, really encourages survivors to finish gens across the board faster than before. And now that they have less concerns about being slugged, about being tunneled, they really just have to finish gens. In a situation where your first chase is not ideal, let's say that you're playing a map such as Gideon, which starts with a lot of pallets. It's, you know, maybe it's got other things going for you, but at the start of the game, you're going to have a lot of safe pallets. If your first chase ends after a minute and a half, which is pretty realistic, you're kind of screwed. If you hook that survivor and then you hear 3 generators pop, you have nothing. The bonus damage for the next generator kick buff only works in a situation where you hook a survivor and you successfully interrupt a gen and you kick it. If that gen pops in front of your face and the other gens are now going to be done a bit later, you really have nothing to show for it. So where some of the buffs that these survivors are getting are going to be really, really nice, I think this one's quite situational and very killer dependent. I don't see it as strong as as it might imply. I do think this is just going to buff some of the killers that already have mobility, that already have teleport, that already are really decent in chase. Because if you're decent in chase and you're getting first down really quickly, kick, now stabilize the gens, next down really quickly, this is really gonna help them. But anyway, I wanted to make a little exercise and think about what the killer meta will change into after this patch. So here we have a very classic meta build. Don't worry about the Wraith power icon. This is just on any killer in general, right? We have a perk such as Corrupt Intervention, so the first few gens are not immediately available. Survivors all spawn together, presumably, and then they have to split out and you have a bit more time. That's great. Then we have Pain Res. Every time you hook on a Scorch Hook, bam, the gen with most progress takes damage, and it also kicks the survivor out of the gen, which triggers DMS and Grim Embrace as well, blocks the gen shortly after if that doesn't happen. So basically you have a lot of perks to slow down gens and block them, and that's how the meta works right now. But after this change, nothing. You might as well just run the same build. It is now even more important than before to have slowdown perks, in my opinion. You no longer have the luxury of running aggressive chase perks and hoping that those aggressive chase perks lead you into a situation where a survivor can be tunneled, right? You can no longer play into, I kill a survivor pretty early and then I play the 3v1. You really have to consider hooking multiple survivors if you don't want to be hit by the two major debuffs that we discussed earlier. So obviously, it's imperative that in your first chase, you don't lose 3 gens. Super important. So Corrupt Intervention, now out of the possibly one of the strongest perks in the game, now feels even more necessary than before. You really need to make sure that after your first down and your first hook, you have some generator to kick. Ideally, a generator with 2 people on it, and then you displace 2 people, and then the whole team is basically doing nothing. So Corrupt Intervention goes from one of the best to still one of the best. Pain Res, Grim Embrace, DMS. These are perks that obviously benefit from hooking each survivor individually. And these perks were really good before. Don't get me wrong, but now I feel like they're going to be even more ingrained into the meta. Keep in mind that now the main strategy is going to be hook survivor A, hook survivor B, hook survivor C, then maybe B, then maybe A, then maybe A again, and bam. Now you've got someone killed, 6 hook stages, and hopefully you don't get hit by the debuffs. So because hooking multiple survivors is so necessary, going for perks that are going to buy you time on the generators seems really important. And I think the perks are really not going to change. There will be some perks, however, that get elevated. Let's talk about some of them. So notice that the 2 debuffs that killers get are, number 1, survivors get faster on gens. Number 2, if you kill someone too early. And number 2, if you are tunneling, generators become unblockable and they become undamageable. But that doesn't mean that you cannot change their speed. So you cannot use deadlock on gens, you cannot use pop on gens, but you can use things that slow them down. I do think that Gift of Pain, which is the first perk that we have on screen right here, is going to be a massive staple of the new meta. It's going to really go up. It has the same trigger condition as Pain Res, pretty much, so you could just run it with Pain Res. And the idea is that since you have to hook survivor A and then go for another survivor, it's a really good thing if that survivor has a debuff on their healing speed and on their general speed if they do heal. With Gift of Pain, basically, anytime a survivor gets on hook, they heal slower, and if they heal, their gen speed is slower. So Gift of Pain is going to be so important in allowing you to hook multiple survivors and keep the game under control. And it does not get nullified by any of the debuffs that we talked about earlier. Dying Light is not as good. Nowhere near as good as Gift of Pain, and it does have a downside, but sometimes you can run it together, and on some killers it does make quite a bit of sense to run it. We made a video not too long ago explaining why Gift of Pain, Dying Light was actually really good on Clown, and I think you should watch that video because that strategy is going to be even more important in the upcoming meta. Notice that almost all of these changes, if you read the patch notes, almost all of these changes do not work in the endgame. All of the things that we talked about, they typically are disabled in the endgame. There's no gens in the endgame, of course. So perks like No Way Out, Annoyed, and endgame related builds with Remember Me and similar, I think are also going to see a bit of a resurgence because they've been comparatively unnerfed. They are completely fine. They're not really buffed, but they're not nerfed. So I think they'll be more attractive. You might have more killers that tunnel they get hit by the debuffs, but they don't care because they have Know It and they expect to get 1 or 2 more kills on top. I also think that Hexes are going to see a big resurgence. Hexes are right now pretty strong at the moment, but they are also relatively unaffected by a lot of the things that we talked about earlier. And they also work really well when you spread hooks. Things like Devour Hope reward you for hooking multiple people. And again, if they do a lot of totems, you have Pentimento from the artist, which makes their gen speed slower, even if you trigger one of the other debuffs that we talked about because you accidentally tunnel or purposefully tunnel. So I do think that a build like what you're seeing down there or something similar to that could be pretty popular. You have Ruin to help you make sure the first few gens don't pop. You have Blood Favor to make sure the first chases are quick and maybe you get it down sooner than you would otherwise, right? And yeah, I think Hexes are going to be pretty big. Other than that, and the changes that we said to Gift to Pain being a bit stronger, I do think the meta on Killer is going to be very similar. It's just the strategy is going to change a little bit. Now, let's look at what I think is the meta for Survivor. It is really difficult to narrow down the meta on Survivor to just 4 perks, right? Because the main strength of Survivor is that they're unpredictable and they can have teamwork perks and one guy can have a perk that helps the whole team, right? But if I had to summarize the meta, something like this seems appropriate. We have Decisive Strike, which is basically an insurance perk, a second chance type perk, in case you get tunneled, which a lot of people run. It is one of the most popular perks that I see in my games. Then we have Unbreakable from Bale. Again, another insurance perk. Many times you'll go a whole game and not get slugged. But when you do, you have that perk there to help you bounce back and make sure that you don't lose a game because a killer suddenly snowballed and decided to slug everyone towards the end of the game. And then it's also very common to have maybe 1 exhaustion perk, here we are running Lithe, and 1 info perk like Kindred or one of the most popular perks in the game when there's an opportunity. It's also really common for survivors to run medkits because another implicit concern of survivors is that if they're all injured, it's really hard to take hits for someone else. It's really hard to go for an unhook. So the situation where every survivor is injured can turn really sour and really badly for survivors in the current patch. But as we're going to see in the next patch, I don't know if this is going to be exactly the meta, but we're going to be leaning into things like this more. Being healthy in the next patch is nowhere near as important. If a survivor is on the ground and you're on the last gen, you arguably don't need to pick them up. Stay on the gen. It's going to be 90 seconds, but the killer will be forced to go either pick them up or they'll be on their feet eventually. So the necessity of going for a hook is now only 70 seconds compared to before. And the necessity of going for a person on the ground is only situational. You don't have to. If the last gen or two are within reach, you should prioritize them, right? So medkits might be a little bit less useful, even though still very strong, especially with add-ons that extend the chase. And running, in my opinion, running perks to do gens faster is now objectively the best strategy in general. Keep in mind, if every killer has a base kit pop goes the weasel, the difference between a survivor going down and you popping a gen and a survivor going down and you barely popping the gen is huge. If a killer downs a teammate next to you and you manage, thanks to your perks, thanks to your items, thanks to your information perks, if you manage to pop that gen before you can kick it, that is huge. Basically, the moment you pop 3 gens and the killer only has maybe 1 or 2 hooks, you've already won the game. Let's just try to picture that, right? You have 3 gens done. The killer now has more difficulty tunneling. The killer has more difficulty getting 1 survivor out of the game. There is simply not enough time for a killer to get 4, 5, 6 more hooks by the time the last 2 gens are done. It's really difficult. So focusing on gens seems to be the main idea. That means also that you don't have to worry about being slugged as much. You don't have to worry about being tunneled as much. You still can bring those perks. They're still strong, which means that you can now have multiple perks to be stronger at chase. I think this is already a tendency in Survivors. Survivors want to run fun, active chase perks. It's very common to see Dramaturgy, Visual, Sprint Burst, Fixated, Finesse. You will see these perks more, and you can have builds kind of like this ones, where you literally have 2 perks or 3 perks dedicated to just running the killer. And I don't want to be that guy, I don't want to say it again, but these perks mostly affect low-tier killers. If you go against 4 Sprint Burst Visuals as a Trapper, it's very different than if you go against that as a Blight. I think you're all intelligent. I think you all understand why. I'm not even going to bother explaining why. So having 3-4 chase perks, I think is going to really be felt a bit more. My whole point so far is that I think this change is going to cement low tier killers in the low tier department and make strong killers actually relatively similar to before. So I'm not a big fan of the idea here. Now, keep in mind that this is not like the hard meta. I think there's a lot of variation that you could have here. For example, switch out Prove Thyself, which is not as strong these days, and put on Resurgence. And this right here is an insane build. This is so easy to play, so stupidly efficient, because you no longer have to worry as much about getting tunneled, and you pretty much don't have to worry at all about long-term slugging. You now can run very efficient builds that used to have a lot of risk and now they don't have any. With a build like this before, you risk getting tunneled, you risk getting slugged, you risk maybe everyone in the team being injured, which then leads to one of those two situations. But now you really have no reason not to run something like this. You're always going to see the gens. You're always going to be doing them a little bit faster. The first gen with a toolbox like this, you're going to crank out 20 seconds sooner than usual or faster, depending on some builds. Every time you get unhooked, the killer's not going to know that you're unhooked, so they're not going to come back immediately. You still have anti-camp, so they're likely not going to be proxy camping you too much. And even if they are, with Resurgence, that perk, the second perk that you see here from Jill, you can be healed in like 4 seconds. Or less, depending on the other perks and other items. And then on top of that, you have Visual and Sprint Boost, which stacks with itself, so you can just be sprinting every 20 seconds. It's very possible Visual's going to get nerfed at some point, but until then, this is going to be a build that you could go against. And generally, this build is just so strong. If you, as a killer, have to spend minutes chasing a survivor, only to put them on the hook, and then that survivor comes off the hook, you don't get notified, and they heal in 3 seconds, like, mathematically, it's just really hard to wrap your head around how in the world you're supposed to beat that. But moving on. How would I keep all of these changes and somehow not break the game? It is entirely possible that the changes that we've been discussing will have very small numbers. Maybe the nerfs that we've seen is just 1%, and maybe nothing that I've said in this video matters. Maybe nothing changes at all, right? But let's assume that the numbers are significant. Let's assume that these changes are here to stay, all of them. How would I counterbalance this to maybe not make killer at the higher level really difficult to play and feel like you're stepping in a landmine? First of all, I am really not a huge fan of killer-specific nerfs. I know a lot of people are like, oh, just take Ghoul and Billy and the S tier killers and just give them something. Unless they work that into their kit a bit more naturally, I don't like that. I honestly would remove these. Keep in mind, Singularity, by the way, is not in the list. I don't know if he got edited or if I just misremembered. So apologies for that. Singularity is not one of the killers affected. It's the other ones. Dracula, when he is in bad form, which gives him crazy mobility, he doesn't see auras. So having Barbecue and Chili on Dracula, I don't think it's that big of a deal. Ghoul, Billy, Nurse, and Blight, I think I agree. These killers are insane. Given them base kit, Barbecue, and base kit Pub Crystal Weasel, it's just so insane. Like as a nurse, you can now put Nowhere to Hide, and every time you get a hook, you're going to see people healing. Keep in mind that her add-ons give her Mangled and Hemorrhage, right? So she's going to have Mangle, Hemorrhage, she's going to have Barbecue and Chili with Nowhere to Hide. Every time she kicks a gen after a hook, which is going to be often because she's nurse, you're going to have a pop and then Nowhere to Hide. Like, how exactly are you going to escape her? So I do understand why they would want nurse not to get that. But I just think it's maybe time for these killers to be balanced by themselves. It is just really weird. But you know what? This I don't feel very strong. If they want to nerf these buffs on these killers temporarily until Ghoul, Billy, Blight are all nerfed and balanced on their own right, I think that would be all right. So I find that weird, personally. This I definitely feel a lot stronger about. I have no idea why hook stages are still 70 seconds. They should be reverted back to 60 seconds or even down to a lower 50 seconds. Keep in mind, as a killer, you really cannot face camp anymore. Keep in mind, as a killer, proxy camping now is really stupid. You're going to be there for 70 seconds, and then you're not even going to know when they unhook immediately. Like, I honestly, and giving survivors a more urgent reason to leave a gen and go for the unhook is a good idea. if killer is rushing to hook survivor 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and splitting hooks, I think it's also a good idea that survivor should be rushing to unhook instead of leaving someone on the hook for a very long time, popping gens, and then they're out of the end game, which is something that right now is very, very doable. So I think hook stages should be reduced back to what they were originally, 60 seconds. At least if these changes are happening. I also think that anti-tunnel perks need to be weakened. Now you might be like, oh, already you have like no collision and a bunch of things. Like, why would this be necessary? You might not think it, but a survivor with no collision can still body block you. If you're chasing another survivor and a survivor with no collision is very, very emboldened by their base kit anti-tunnel and their perk anti-tunnel, they can come, get in front of you and drop pallets. That, it doesn't matter, really. It doesn't really matter that they have no collision. If they drop a pallet for their teammate and stun you, that slows you down. If they vault a window, you kind of vault it during their time. So they can actually do a survivor that is on off hook can actually still do a lot to mess with you, whether it's flashy saves or just lingering around someone else that went down by a pallet. I do think that perks like off the record, decisive, and so on overall would need to be weakened across the board to really not encourage aggressive off-hook behavior. I think one of the scariest things that can happen in this patch is that you hook a survivor, now everything is telling you to hook another survivor, but that survivor comes off the hook and now just comes and tries to take a hit or somehow mess with you. And you really are in a situation where you're like, okay, I'm forced to hook this guy and I don't wanna. Because if I hook this guy, now the gens are unblocked and undamageable. So yeah, I think that's pretty common sense. And this one's less obvious, but I think perks, especially Resurgence, need to be absolutely nerfed. If we are going to encourage the killer to leave a survivor on the hook and let them unhook and let them heal afterwards, those heals need to take longer than 4 seconds. I don't see how, and I'm not even saying a low tier killer, I don't see how an average killer is expected to get 4 or 5 hooks before killing anyone and still do that with one perk making heals so quick. So Resurgence, in my opinion, absolutely needs to be nerfed to account for this, because I think right now it would suddenly shoot up to be one of the strongest perks in the game, which it already is, but even more so. And I don't know if there's any other perk that also would need a touch up, but that's the main one. And finally, and possibly more importantly, with all of these changes, making survivors have so much time and so little pressure to deal with unhooking, 70 seconds, and slugging, 90 seconds, I honestly think toolboxes need to go right now. Right now. There is absolutely no reason as a survivor not to bring toolboxes in the current version of the game. The only reason is to maybe bring a medkit instead. But toolboxes are so strong. The fact that one toolbox can be on any one survivor, you can have 4 of them, and they each save 20 or more seconds on a gen, absolutely destroys anything that the killer gets in this update. Anything that you get in this update being a little bit faster, being a little bit more capable of hitting a generator without any perks and do more damage. All of that goes out of the window if that gem pops 20 seconds earlier and you don't get it in time. So toolboxes should be reworked into having other effects, being more utility-based, and not just being something that you slap on and bam, 20 or 24 seconds of a gen. I made a video explaining just how volatile gen speeds are and how some perks and especially toolboxes affect it. And I honestly think that even though the game has gotten a little bit better since, it really hasn't changed very much, especially on the toolbox side. On the healing side, it's a little bit better. Go watch that video because I think it will help you understand what I mean in case I haven't made my point very, very clear right now. Anyway, that's my thoughts about this update. What a crazy update. I think that the developers obviously are taking a long shot. It's possible they might get scared when they see the initial reaction and roll it back. And it's possible they'll go with it and just adjust the game around it. Just keep in mind, anything that nerfs killers can be changed later. You can buff them in some other way later. You can adjust things. So I'm not super concerned about the game of the future. I don't think this update is going to kill the game. But god damn, dude, god damn if it's not gonna make the gap between low tier and high tier killers worse. We also have made a video about that gap if you wanna watch what I mean by it. Anyway, have fun. I'll be streaming this next week, the PTB, and we'll see the actual numbers and we'll make up our mind on how impactful this really is. See ya.